and distribution to over 20 podcast platforms and additional video for Facebook, YouTube, and IGTV. For broadcast possibilities and to get your podcast started, contact us 879-4319. 879-4319. Be heard on Radio St. George, Radio Dixie, and a podcast studio. Just a few of the great things happening at Dixie State University.
Welcome to the podcast. We Do Recover with Jared Miller, your host.
And I'm Dr. Terry Sellers, your co-host.
This is a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, about recovery.
We want to talk about what successful recovery can look like.
Brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers.
Good morning, listeners. Super excited you're listening to podcast 2 of We Do Recover. This morning we got Darcy Collings for episode 2. Super excited to get this guest on, hear her story. Before that, though, let's do a little check-in. Dr. Terry Sellers, how are we doing this morning?
Good morning. Hello, everybody. How's life?
So Dr. Sellers is Skyping in from where are you at?
Oh, I'm at Journey Treatment Center, believe it or not.
Nice. Just doing the rounds,
Actually at work right now, so I had to take a little time out.
I love it. Sean, what's going on, brother? How are you?
Made it. It's a holiday today, and we're all here.
That's right.
Fine.
And of course, Darcy, thank you for being our guest. How are you doing? Where are you Skyping in from, Darcy?
I am Skyping in from my apartment, actually.
Nice. Location-wise?
In good old West Jordan. Good old West Jordan.
West Jordan, Utah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, to kick this thing off, we came out with a hotline number. So that's to call in for any questions you have, any comments, any ideas you want to hear on future episodes. That number is 801-410-0676. And we actually had a caller call in from Nebraska, and she had a question. So let's go ahead and get it. Dr. Sellers, are you ready?
I think so.
Here we go. Uh-oh. Hang on.
It's okay. If we don't have it, I can basically recite the question, I believe.
We got it.
Okay. All right.
I just got to connect. Technical difficulties.
Did it get disconnected?
Well, I put it on airplane mode so I wouldn't be getting
you turn on air. Oh, you did that
notifications.
after you connected because you'd go on airplane mode after, then it just turns off everything. So,
Yeah.
oh, why do we test everything before? I don't know, man. Come on.
I don't know.
Hey, Jared, don't push any more buttons.
I know, right?
Get your hands off of the buttons.
Okay, well,
Hey, I have a question while you're trying to cue that up.
go
I
ahead.
have a statement and a question. Darcy, you're our first actual official guest. How does it feel to be number one?
Sounds pretty fantastic, actually, Sellers.
You are seriously number one right now. We had
I think I bothered Jared a little bit. Put myself in that position.
good for you.
Get me in.
I like it.
Not at
I'm
all.
glad you're here.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
This is Jessica. I'm calling from Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, I have a question for Dr. Sellers. I absolutely love the podcast and what you guys are doing. My question is, what is the best way to confront a family member that I believe may or may not have a substance abuse issue? Thanks so much.
All right. Well, that's a beautiful question. Thanks for listening, and thanks for the nice things you had to say about the podcast. I would say there's a number of things you do when you confront a family member that you think might have addiction issues. The very first is you got to stay calm. No matter what, it may escalate. The point is you have to remain calm, okay? And then number two is you want to talk to that family member about your feelings because that's something they cannot argue with. Okay, they can argue with facts, but they can argue with your feelings. So let them know how the things you are seeing make you feel. Third is, and I think this is really important, try to catch them, if you're going to confront them, try to catch them when they're not high or drunk, because that's just not going to work. So if you can, like a lot of times, first thing in the morning, people aren't high necessarily yet, or if you know a time, like maybe they're coming home from work and they haven't used or drank that day yet, that's a really important thing as well. And then lastly, I think that I think this isn't the last one. This is the one I already talked about. But I think really importantly is to remain calm and tell them your feelings, but be really factual. Just tell them what you see, and don't really get into an argument with them. Just tell them the things you see and feel. And I think those three things are really key. Listen, you're probably going to have to confront them over and over. It's very rare that a person with addiction issues is going to just roll over and say, you're right, the first time. Keep with it, stay on it, and then set some boundaries and consequences. Say, listen, I'm no longer willing to do this in your life if you keep using drugs or alcohol. Maybe it's you can no longer be around my kids when you're using drugs or alcohol, or whatever those boundaries are. Set those, because that will help them see what they're doing to you and maybe push them to treatment quicker.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Sellers. Appreciate that. Thank you, Jessica. We appreciate all the callers. Again, that number is 801-410-0676. Call in with any questions, comments, recommendations for future episodes. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. Episode 002. We got Darcy Collings here. Darcy, let's get it. Tell us about your beautiful life in recovery today. What does that look like?
Thank you so much for having me on, you guys. So I have been in recovery. It'll be 7 years on the 15th of next month. And my life today is incredible. I'm living a life that I never imagined I could live. I have a 15-year-old daughter who I'll get a little bit more into that part of this story, but I don't have parental rights to her, and I get her 50% of the time, and I still don't have rights to her, and I am her hero, and our relationship is so amazing. I'm working for a treatment center. I am the admissions manager for a treatment center, and so I get to help those that are struggling find treatment and help find healing. About a month ago, and he and I have actually started a business. We started a business in March called D&D Fitness and Nutrition.
I love it.
Gosh, yeah, I can honestly tell you, in these 7 years in recovery, I have lived more life than I had previously. I mean, obviously, while I was using and stuff, but like even just adventures, like going and exploring Utah. I had never explored Utah before. I lived my life in so much fear and social anxiety, and so I never did anything fun. I was too afraid all the time. And I'm also in for my psychology degree, which is pretty incredible.
Congratulations.
So yeah, my life is amazing and busy and just wonderful. I'm so happy today.
I love it. Tell our listeners about the business that you started. I know that I follow you on social media, right? I see you do a lot of posts around fitness, around working out. You're holding up 2 bags of different things and you're saying, this has so many calories and this is that. I mean, it's amazing and I love it. Please share.
Yeah, thank you. So really what started that was about a year ago, I had just put my health and my appearance and everything on back burner. It was more, I was an executive director at a women's treatment center, and my life revolved around that job and my recovery and my daughter, right? And so my boyfriend, who is incredibly passionate and amazing with nutrition and fitness, he had sat me down because I get a cholesterol test last year, which really really old. I was like, I'm not old enough to need my cholesterol checked, but it was really scary high. And he was like, Darcy, we need to do something about this. And I've struggled with an eating disorder for most of my life. And so I was kind of afraid to go down that road of fixing my food and working out, because I get very, very obsessive, and that still had me a little bit in fear that I would fall back into that eating disorder. And he was like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. And it started just kind of adjusting my food to a place where it didn't suck, right? Like I wasn't just eating chicken and broccoli every day. But there were other alternatives, right? And so through the nutrition, I've been able to lose 45 pounds.
Congratulations.
But not
That's
only
awesome.
that, I've been working. Thank you. Yeah. And I did it. It was really slow, and I had to be really patient with myself through that process. The addict that I am, of course, I want it all right now. I want results right now. And so it's been a pretty incredible process, an incredible journey. And I've been able to, so we power lift, which is something I never thought I'd ever be interested in. Like back squatting and deadlifting, things like that. I've never been stronger physically in my entire life.
Yeah, Dr. Sellers does a lot of powerlifting, right? Dr. Sellers, you're a competitive power lifter?
Yeah, I think I lift the Egg McMuffin from the table to my mouth.
I've actually witnessed that.
Yeah, I'll bet you have. Food is important to me, sadly.
I love it. I love it.
Food is important to me too.
I know. I get it. I don't mean.
And I get to eat. I know.
Awesome.
So that's really what started this, and giving others just that guidance in that direction, and not just with food and nutrition, but showing others their own strength and their own worth. My worth was always based on my appearance, all of the surface stuff, and
really
that
helping them
looks very
find
different
self-confidence,
today.
right?
My hormones are leveled. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. When you can help people find self-confidence, it's a game changer for them.
It is such a game changer, and I feel good. I feel I'm almost 40, because I actually just turned 39, so let's stay in 30s, but I've never felt healthier than I am today.
That's awesome.
And I want to show people how to do that. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. You guys are listening to Darcy Collins' Story of Recovery. This podcast is brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers, where addiction ends and healing begins. All right, Darcy, take us into, and let's get Dr. Sellers chiming in on this, your DOC, right? So you've shared what you're doing today in recovery. It's beautiful. I love it. You're an entrepreneur. You're working in recovery, helping other people out. You're helping people find, their passion and their fitness. Take us into, the beginning.
The beginnings. I was 20, and I had just given birth to my beautiful daughter, Harley, and the birth, everything was great. The nurse had brought in a pain pill for me, and I was, most of my life I've been really afraid of taking pills because I have a lot of panic attacks and anxiety. And I told her I didn't need it, and she said, no, you're going to want this. And so I took that pain pill, and like my 24 years of self-hatred, I just remember 15 minutes after, I was thinking, oh, I have arrived. Like, I can do life. And it was just that one pain pill. From then on, it spiraled me into an 8-year cycle of, I want to say just pain pills, but it was everything and anything I could get my hands on. It took 8 years. So pills, meth, heroin, alcohol, a lot of doctor prescribed medications that I had been given. I was given Adderall, benzos, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, and this was that 8 years of, it was an awful, dark time, but that's really what started me off into my active addiction. I want to say it was just that pill, but most of my life, like I said earlier, I've struggled with an eating disorder. So other self-defeating behaviors, right? A lot of self-hatred. And that pill fixed me in that moment.
It all falls under the umbrella of mental health, right? Whether it's a eating disorder, whether it's a gambling addiction, and that's important. I want to point that out real quick. However, Dr. Sellers, educate us on what happens inside the brain that makes us go, man, I felt something that I've never felt before. The addiction starts, and it kind of starts to spiral. Like, what is it? Educate our listeners on what is it that is so attractive about it, or how do we lose people in it so fast?
Yeah, we might have to do a full episode on this, because this is quite a ordeal, but and maybe one of my favorite topics. But if you remember my story from last week, it was the same exact thing, right? Like, I took my first pain pill, Dilaudid, and kind of almost had this religious spiritual experience, sort of. But what happens is there is a chemical released in our midbrains, and our midbrain is a very primitive part of our brain. There's a chemical release called dopamine, and dopamine is a chemical which we experience as pleasurable. So everything in your life that you do that is pleasurable happens, you feel it as pleasure because your midbrain releases dopamine when that activity is happening.
Like eating a piece of chocolate cake. Yeah?
Okay, so all of the drugs of abuse release dopamine in the midbrain, and they release those drugs, they release that dopamine in amounts that are much higher than any normal activity that we can do. So our brains experience those drugs as pleasurable. Now, I think everyone's brain is a little bit different, which is why people have different drugs of choice and that sort of thing. But I have mentioned this multiple times in the past, just not on this podcast yet, but I have a lot of people that come up and say, well, how do you do that? Every time I take a Lortab, I throw up. Well, congratulations, because that didn't release very much dopamine in your midbrain if you're throwing up. For me, it didn't do that. For Darcy, it doesn't sound like it did that at all. Like, she didn't throw up. She felt pretty good and felt she had arrived. So that's really a very quick summary of what happens in the brain is massive amounts of dopamine are released, and that feels good to us.
And I just want to chime in real quick. We're not trying to glorify it, right? We're trying to, listeners, if you're listening to this, just really kind of be self-aware. And if you take a medication and you get some type of euphoric feeling, your first reaction is going to be more. But hopefully the logic side of your brain can pump the brakes and go, hey, this is the introduction to what could become an addiction, which is a scary thing. Darcy, is that Sorry.
Let me just chime in real quick. And the one problem with that whole thing is if you take a substance then that releases more dopamine than anything else you can do in your life, then those things start to become unimportant. And now you live for nothing other than drugs.
Great point.
Right? If all your other activities that used to bring you pleasure and be fun don't release that much dopamine, and so nobody wants to do those things anymore. So it kind of totally takes over and ruins your life for everything except the drug. And that's not life. Like, Darcy can tell us what life is right now, because you can look at, and I want to comment on Darcy too, by the way. I've known her for quite a while. And Darcy looks so good today. And I'm not talking about necessarily even the physical transformation. I'm talking about look at her face and her eyes and the brightness and the things that you see in her face. That's life.
Absolutely.
You look in the face of a drug addict and there's no life there at all. That's all death.
Yeah, we can all remember those days, those dark times. So Darcy, bring us to the point where you started off with a pain pill, giving birth to your daughter. Started to spiral out of control. This podcast isn't really about war story and a drug journaling, but take us into the transformation where you realized, okay, enough is enough. And you started to move into recovery. What did that look like? Like, did you have to take some jobs that you weren't exactly super excited about? What were maybe some of the triggers? Can you share that with the listeners?
Absolutely. So like I said, 7 years ago, next month is my sobriety birthday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So I spent about 9 months doing treatment. So I was in Steps Recovery Center for 92 days. And then I did sober living and outpatient for 6 months after that, in Payson, Utah. And at that time, when I was in outpatient, I had to get a job, to pay for my sober living. And so I was on the bus from Payson to Provo at 6 a.m. every morning in the winter, 1.5 miles to work every morning, and then doing that every day, 5 days a week, to get to IOP. I would have to rush to the bus stop. And that's what my life looked like for about 6 months, which was incredibly humbling and a time that I will always honestly cherish. I mean, it really showed me what I'm capable of doing, and how hard I was willing to fight for my life and for my future. When I left treatment, I moved in with my dad, and I got a job. It was a very part-time job working at a gas station for minimum wage. And again, this was very humbling because before my addiction, I was working in the mortgage industry, and I made, I did really well for myself, made pretty good money. And so it was really humbling to do that job. But actually, I look back, and that was the funnest job that I have had. At that time, it was actually quite perfect for me. It kept me in a very present place, living very simple, because I tend to go to a place of, it's almost a manic place of like, I need the amazing job, and I need a car, and all of these things. I need my life to look like it did before I started using. And so it was really quite perfect to be in that place. It was probably about 18 months when I started my first job in the treatment industry, and I had gotten a job as a case manager at an outpatient facility. Since then, I haven't looked back. That's where my passion lies, is helping those that struggle find the life that I found today and give back what I've been given. And so that brings me today as the admissions manager at Maple Mountain Recovery.
That's amazing. We all have similar stories in, like Terry shared last week, or Dr. Sellers shared last week, that he had to take a job scooping cookies at $8 an hour. I had to take a job working temp jobs before I even got a full-time job working as a janitor, right? We've all been there. So thank you for sharing that vulnerability of where it started and what you've been able to make of it today. So, Sean.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm truly grateful.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Let's bring I'm going to use a label here, a Normian on this.
Normian.
Did you ever have to work some jobs to get to the position you're at, where you're the?
Nothing like you guys. I mean, yeah, I had a lot of free internships, so I was slave labor for other radio stations, and to get where I'm at, I did a whole lot of traveling around the country, and had a job here for 1.5 years and got fired or let go, and pack up and move, go to Minnesota, go to Seattle, go to Elko, all over the place. And then it took a while to get to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like throwing Sean in every once in a while, because it really just gives everybody the understanding that everybody starts somewhere, right? If you're listening to this and you've never had a substance abuse or chemical problem or an addiction, you can still find a way to relate. So awesome. Dr. Sellers, you got any questions for Darcy? You want to throw some curveballs at her?
Sure, I got some curveballs, but they're not that. It's not going to be tough because it's Darcy's story. But what happened that made you decide this is no longer for me? The drugs and the alcohol. What was maybe that turning point for you?
So the last 6 months, while I was out, I was living in my car, and I remember just praying daily, God, please just let me die if I have to live another life or another day like I did today. And I could just feel like my soul just breaking. I finally got arrested after the 8-year run that I was on. I finally got arrested, and I had felt so much peace while I was sitting handcuffed in the back of that cop car. And I didn't know that I was going to seek recovery at that moment. But I think it was that peace that I had felt like, okay, like I got like, and I think that's the point, is where I was ready to kill myself. and I knew I didn't want to die,
Yeah.
but I couldn't keep living like that.
I think that's a really important to hear. One of the things Jared said earlier is one of our goals in this podcast is not to glorify the use of drugs and to tell war stories and that sort of stuff. But listen to what Darcy just said. She felt peace, handcuffed in the back seat of a police car. She felt better than she had felt in a long time. That's
Beautiful.
how drugs end up.
Yep.
Like, you may get a bunch of dopamine in the
Thank you
beginning,
for
but in
joining
the
us
end,
today on
you
We Do
are
Recover with
handcuffed in the
Jared
back
Miller.
of a police
Help
car.
us spread our
Thank you for
message
taking
of
us
hope.
away with that, Dr.
Like,
Sellers.
comment,
Sorry.
and share.
You're good.
If you
Thank you
have
so
any
much.
topics or ideas for future
Darcy, thank you
shows,
for coming on.
In here.
check out on our Facebook page.
Thanks, guys.
That Facebook page is We Do Recover with Jared Miller. If you or a loved one needs help, please reach out to us. Again, thank you for listening. Brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers.
This has been a production from a podcast studio.